This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Adele Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. Well, China vows to defend its national interests after U.S. President Donald Trump threatens a 10% tariff on Chinese imports from as early as next month. The warning raising the specter of another tit-for-tat trade war between the world's top two economies, with the Chinese currency and stocks taking a hit. A fresh sign that countering Beijing is high on Mr. Trump's agenda. Top diplomats from the US, Japan, India, and Australia are doubling down on their Quad grouping commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. And as part of that regional commitment, Japan says it has no choice but to strengthen its defense capabilities in response to growing security concerns in East Asia. And Singapore's Electoral Boundaries Review Committee has been formed. That's a key step in the lead-up to the country's next general election, which must be held by November. Also in East Asia tonight, China says it plans to crack down on internet scams after a series of human trafficking incidents. We discuss how it's collaborating with Thailand and Myanmar later in the program. Well, U.S. President Donald Trump says that he intends to impose a 10% tariff on Chinese imports as early as 1st of February, a move that will escalate the trade war between the two largest economies in the world.
We're talking about a tariff of 10% on China based on the fact that they're sending fentanyl to Mexico and Canada.
The proposed tariffs would come on top of levies that Mr. Trump imposed on more than $300 billion worth of Chinese imports during his first term, and additional levies imposed by the Biden administration. And for more on this, we are joined by CNA's Tan Yu-Guan in Shanghai. So, Yu-Guan, first up, what is the reaction from China to Mr. Trump's tariff threats?
Well, there was a foreign ministry briefing this afternoon, and when asked to comment on Trump's remarks on tariffs, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Miao Ning says that China has stated its position on this issue many times, and that China believes that there are no winners in trade wars and tariff wars. Now, these comments echoes almost word for word what Chinese Premier Ding Xuexiang said at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Now, during the address ahead of Trump's comments, Vice Premier Ding also said that his country was looking for a win-win solution to trade tensions and wanted to expand its imports. Now, back to today's foreign ministry briefing, the spokesperson also added that China has always firmly safeguarded its national interests, well, in a way hinting at possible retaliatory moves from China. Now, when asked if Beijing and Washington are communicating on the issue, Miao Ning said that China is willing to maintain communication with the United States, properly handle differences, expand mutually beneficial cooperation, and promote stable, healthy, and sustainable development of China-US relations. So it's the usual diplomatic speak from China, nothing out of the ordinary, but at least the language is still diplomatic, which possibly means there is a room for deal. Otelli?
Right. And do we know how much of an impact would the new tariffs have on China?
Well, the impact will certainly be felt, especially by the exporters in China. Data shows from January to November 2024 last year, China exports to the United States accounts for 14.6% of total exports. In other words, for every $7 China earns from its exports, $1 comes from the US. So losing that dollar is bad news, given that the economy is struggling with lackluster consumption, youth unemployment, real estate slump. That we all know. Although thanks to some bright spots, a slew of stimulus measures, and the GDP still officially grew by 5% last year, that would be an envious for most countries, right? But still, China's exporters are clearly looking for other markets, because if you compare the 14.6% share of the American market to the 19% that American market had in 2018, there's clearly been a gradual shift away from the American market in these years, in this about 6 years or so. So we must also remember that this decline is a result of earlier tariffs, right? Already many Chinese goods are subject to tariffs ranging from 7.5% to 25%, depending on the product category. Recent months, the US also introduced or increased tariffs on several Chinese imports, including electric vehicles, 100%, semiconductors, 50%, lithium-ion batteries, 25%. So for EVs, for example, it's already exceeded the 60% that Trump is threatening. So EV makers have already discounted the US market and target other markets. In fact, I bumped into a Danish guy who was a long-time expat of Shanghai just a few days ago, and he's into making furniture here. And he says that his American buyers have already been paying 25% on his furniture from zero tariffs before. But he's still competitive because the supply chain here is robust and very efficient. So if those tariffs to the American markets increase further, he'll be looking for other markets like Singapore, Japan, and Korea. Of course, the American market is attractive to him because it is big, somewhat unified. So, for example, you only need one set of labels, one set of marketing materials, for example. So it's also worth noting, if he pulls out of the American market, the American consumers will also lose out, right? Because made-in-China goods do make up about 10 to 12% of what the average American consume. And if those goes away, the prices could possibly rise. Oteli?
Well, thanks so very much for that report. CNA's Tan Yu-Guan in Shanghai. Right, for market reactions now in China to threats of more tariffs. As you can see, Roland Lim standing by for more. Roland?
Thanks, Sally. Chinese and Hong Kong stocks fell after a hint from President Trump of new tariffs on Chinese imports. The slide ended a brief reprieve for the markets. Shanghai Composite closing 0.9% lower, and that's the single biggest drop in nearly 2 weeks. The onshore renminbi weakened around 0.2% despite the midpoint being fixed at over a 2-month high by the central bank. It is currently unchanged at 7.273 to the dollar. Hong Kong stocks snapping a 6-day winning streak. Tech counters there leading the losers. Now, they were under pressure as the US unveiled a major artificial intelligence initiative. E-commerce giant JD.com fell more than 4%. Video sharing platform Bilibili slumped by more than 6%. And Alibaba also not spared, slipping 3.1% for the day. And that'll do it for now. I'll be back a little later on.
Thanks very much, Roland. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has hosted his first meeting with the foreign ministers of the Quad nations. We're talking about Japan, India, and Australia, just a day after being sworn in as the country's top diplomat. Well, the 4 countries reaffirmed their commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. And analysts are saying that the meeting signals countering China as a priority for the Trump White House. The Quad ministers emphasized the importance of upholding the rule of law, which strongly opposes any actions aimed at changing the regional status quo through force. Well, experts are also saying that it is a reference to China's claims over Taiwan and disputes in the South China Sea. Cooperation on critical minerals, also a key topic. President Trump signed an executive order instructing Mr. Rubio to explore boosting American mining activity, an area said to be dominated by China. Meantime, a key priority for Australia is about securing assurances from Washington regarding the massive AUKUS defence project. Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong called her talks with Mr. Rubio very positive, especially as the US aims to expand its military presence in the region. China has denounced the Quad as a Cold War-era alliance, warning that AUKUS could fuel an arms race in the region. Well, on the sidelines of the Quad discussions, Tokyo's foreign minister said that Japan has no choice but to continue strengthening its defense capabilities, given the security situation in East Asia. Japan's foreign minister Takeshi Iwaya met with the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz in Washington. Tokyo is undertaking a historic military buildup and plans to double its defense spending by 2027. Well, that's in response to China's growing military might, as well as nuclear provocations from North Korea. Donald Trump's return to the White House has put more pressure on allies to step up their defense spending, with Japan being no exception. Well, Beijing also firming up ties with its allies. Chinese President Xi Jinping held a video call with Russian leader Vladimir Putin yesterday, just hours after new U.S. President Donald Trump's inauguration. and they proposed new ways to further their partnership, previously touted as having no limits. Both leaders gearing up to respond to U.S. President Donald Trump, who has been stirring the tariff pot. Mr. Xi praised the nation's close cooperation, saying that it helped bring positive energy to reforming the global system.
В новом году готов вместе с вами вывести китайско-российские отношения в новую высоту, противостоять внешней.
Мы выстраиваем наши связи на основе дружбы, обоюдного доверия и поддержки, равноправия и взаимной выгоды. Эти связи самодостаточны, не зависят от внутриполитических факторов и текущей мировой конъюнктуры.
Well, two undersea telecoms cables that connect Taiwan to its Matsu Islands near the coast of China have been disconnected. Authorities have activated backup communications, but they do not suspect sabotage.
根据这个 AIS 还有 SAWS 这两种雷达去确认，并没有在断的地方发现频率的传输。那所以我们研判它是一个自然的劣化。
The two cables provide internet services to some 10,000 residents on Matsu Islands. They are expected to be restored by the end of next month. This month alone, Taiwan has reported 4 instances of undersea cable malfunctions compared to 3 cases over the past 2 years. Taipei has accused Chinese vessels of damaging their submarine cables as part of grey zone tactics to harass the island, which China considers its own territory. But Beijing says those claims are baseless. Taiwan has since said that it will dispatch its navy to help its Coast Guard respond to suspicious activity near its undersea cables. South Korea's Yonhap News says that investigators have failed in their third attempt this week to forcibly bring in impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol for questioning over his short-lived martial law bid. Well, the Corruption Investigation Office is considering plans to interrogate Mr. Yoon at his detention center should its repeated attempts fail. The CIO chief has also urged Mr. Yoon to respect the court's decision. CIO investigators have tried to bring Mr. Yoon in twice this week. Their last attempt yesterday ended in failure after Mr. Yoon returned to the detention center past 9 p.m. local time. The facility's rules state that inmates cannot be questioned without their consent after that time. Mr. Yoon had stopped at a military hospital to check on an unspecified medical condition after his impeachment hearing at the Constitutional Court. The CIO expressed regret over Mr. Yoon's delayed return, seen by some as an attempt to avoid interrogation. South Korea's Transport Ministry says that it will remove the concrete barrier at Muan International Airport following last month's Jeju Air crash. Critics had slammed its runway design, saying that it fails to meet safety standards. Well, the investigators are still probing the cause of the crash, but questions have been raised about why the concrete structure, known as a localizer, was at the end of the runway. Experts say that the structure used to guide landings at airports likely made the disaster more deadly than it might have been. 179 people were killed on board the Jeju Air flight when the plane skidded off the runway and slammed into the barrier. Now, authorities say a recent inspection revealed that improvements are needed for localizers at 7 airports across the country, including Muan and Jeju International Airport. The measures include placing the foundation structures for localizers underground or replacing them with easy-to-break structures. The Transport Ministry says it will ensure a 240-meter-long runway safety area that is installed at all airports, meet relevant regulations, and also free of major obstacles. The shutdown of Muan Airport has been extended until the 18th of April. A short break coming up, but what we have for you in East Asia tonight. Sunac China becoming the first Chinese property developer to restructure its onshore debt. Plus, Japan begins annual labor talks that are likely to lead to another year of bumper wage hikes. Hello Hello again. You're watching East Asia Tonight. We've got your business news coming up right now with Roland Lim. And Roland, in the troubled property sector in China, I believe one firm is actually managing to restore some order in its debt.
Well, it's not completely out of the woods, though. Sunac China has managed to restructure its onshore debt, and it has emerged as the first Chinese property developer to do so. The property firm says holders of all 10 bonds have accepted its restructuring proposal. The landmark deal enables Sunac, once one of China's biggest real estate investors, to deleverage its $2 billion outstanding onshore debt by more than half. Experts say Sunac's restructuring success is poised to open the floodgates for a flurry of similar deals this year, with a recovery nowhere in sight for China's struggling property sector. Sunac was also the first to complete a comprehensive overhaul of its $9 billion offshore debt in November of 2023. It still faces a winding up petition issued by China Cinda Asset Management in Hong Kong earlier this month, about $30 million in unpaid debts and interest still pending. The hearing in Hong Kong set to be scheduled for March the 19th. Shares in the company rose by as much as 8.4% in Hong Kong earlier today, but all those gains have been given up, down more than 4.2% for the day. Sunac shares are nearly 30% in the red so far this year. Chinese EV makers appear to be coming out from the initial shock from the European Union's steep tariffs on electric cars made in China. Now, China's EV exports to the EU reported an uptick in the month of December. According to Chinese customs data, the volume of EVs exported to the EU rose to 32,849 units in December, and that's up 8.3% year on year. The gains reverse 2 consecutive months of sharp declines, largely driven by the EU's decision to raise tariffs on Chinese EVs by up to 45% starting from October. Sales in October plunged almost 40%, while November sales were down by a quarter. The EU remains the top buyer for Chinese EVs last year, purchasing nearly 30% of China's outbound shipments. But the 27-nation bloc saw its total annual imports of Chinese EVs fall about 6% on year in 2024. Analysts warned that there was a high risk of further deterioration in EU-China ties this year, with more trade products potentially being targeted by protectionist policies. Additionally, Chinese EVs were exported at lower cost last year. The unit price of Chinese EV exports to the EU, Latin America, and Central Asia experienced declines ranging from 4.6% to 39%. Staff in China government-owned financial institutions reportedly facing imminent pay cuts. Beijing is readying to cap on the annual income of staff that could be rolled out by as early as next month. That's amid an economic slowdown and official concern over any show of wealth or conspicuous consumption. Reports say that the cap is to be set at a little more than $137,300 for annual income. And those whose incomes already exceed this mark will have their pay cut. This means middle and senior managers could see their pay packets by as much as half in the overall. Around 27 financial giants in China could be affected. This includes the big 5 banks, 6 leading insurers, and 4 major bad debt managers. The bulk of the cuts is expected to be made through shrinking bonuses. The cap is in line with the Common Prosperity Drive launched in 2021 to address social and income inequality as growth slowed. Both state-owned and private sector firms have already been proactively lowering salaries and bonuses and discouraging any ostentatious display of wealth. China also set to slash pay by about half at the central bank and 2 financial regulators. Japan's biggest business lobby, Keidanren, and other trade unions have launched their annual wage talks, with more bumper salary hikes expected to come amid rising inflation and structural labor shortages. A poll by private think tank, that's the Japan Center for Economic Research, suggests the country's big firms are expected to offer their union wage hikes of 4.74% on average this year. The estimate is lower than the 5.33% last year. Now, this would mean more spending money for workers, but higher labor costs and squeezed profits for the companies. Policymakers are also watching to see how far the momentum spreads to smaller firms as they get more leeway to raise interest rates. Major retailers are also offering huge increases for a second year in a row to retain staff. They are usually among the most tight-fisted of employers, tapping on a vast pool of part-time, lower-paid retirees and housewives. The nation's biggest union, Rengo, is seeking wage hikes of at least 5% for 2025. It also set a target of at least 6% for smaller firms to narrow the income gap with workers at big firms. For 2024, companies agreed to an average of 5.1%. That's the biggest in 3 decades. Wage discussions are expected to conclude around March, taking effect up to a few months later. SoftBank, OpenAI, and Oracle are teaming up to fund AI infrastructure in a partnership called Stargate. Now, they're joining in the efforts of U.S. President Donald Trump, unveiled this morning to speed up development of the emerging technology. The initiative comes as the U.S. looks for new ways to remain ahead of China in the AI arms race. The joint venture will deploy some $100 billion immediately and are looking to increase the spend to at least $500 billion. Microsoft, NVIDIA, and ARM are also joining the initiative as technology partners. President Trump touted the project, saying that it will keep funds in the country.
This monumental undertaking is a resounding declaration of confidence in America's potential under a new president. It'll ensure the future of technology. What we want to do is we want to keep it in this country. China is a competitor and others are competitors. We want it to be in this country, and we're making it available. I'm going to help a lot through emergency declarations because we have an emergency. We have to get this stuff built.
The company's CEOs joined Mr. Trump at the White House for the launch. It follows an early announcement by the U.S. president when he revoked a 2023 executive order signed by Joe Biden that sought to reduce AI risks. Checking in on one of the 3 Stargate investors, Japanese tech giant SoftBank shares ending the day nearly 11% higher. Other AI-related shares also gaining on the announcement. Chipmaker Tokyo Electron up 1.7%, Advantest up by 4%. And that'll do it for business. Utali.
Thanks so very much, Roland. Well, some news outside of East Asia. Singapore's Electoral Boundaries Review Committee, or EBRC, has been formed. Well, the country must hold its next general election by November. Well, the Elections Department says that the EBRC will review the boundaries of the current electoral divisions. The committee will recommend the number and boundaries of group representation constituencies and single-member constituencies. It will take into account population shifts and housing developments. Prime Minister Lawrence Wong has also directed the registration officer to update the registers of electors before 1st of April. Public inspection of the registers of electors will be opened next month. Well, let's take a closer look at what the Electoral Boundaries Review Committee is. The committee's job is to recommend the number, size, and boundaries of group representation constituencies, or GRCs, and single-member constituencies, or SMCs. In doing so, they have to factor in changes in the number of electors in current electoral divisions and new housing developments. Now, the terms of reference for the committee are set out by the Prime Minister. And for the last 3 general elections, then Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong had directed the committee to reduce the size of the GRCs and to create more SMCs. So who's in a committee? It's typically made up of civil servants from the Singapore Land Authority, Housing and Development Board, Department of Statistics, and the Elections Department. In recent years, the committee has been chaired by the Cabinet Secretary. And on that note, it's time to go for a break. Coming up next on East Asia Tonight, Beijing, Bangkok, and Naypyidaw vow to shut down scam centers operating out of Myanmar and rescue the people still trapped inside. CNA's Tan Si-hui and Saksit Sombat joins us after this break. There, you're watching East Asia Tonight. Donald Trump says he is considering imposing a 10% tariff on Chinese imports as soon as February. He says this is in response to China's role in America's fentanyl crisis. And just a day into the job, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio hosts his first meeting with the foreign ministers of the Quad nations, doubling down on their commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. Japan under pressure to step up military spending after Donald Trump returns to the White House. Tokyo says it has no choice but to boost its defense capabilities given the security situation in East Asia. China, Myanmar and Thailand have vowed to wipe out scam centers operating along the Myanmar border. Officials from the three countries have met in the Chinese city Kunming, saying that they are making every effort to rescue people still trapped inside the centers and to arrest those responsible. China is cracking down on online scams after a series of cases. The most recent one involved a Chinese actor who went missing after he was fooled into going for a casting call in Thailand. Wang Xing was rescued and returned to Thailand, and his story went viral on social media. Last week, China's top diplomat Wang Yi called a rare meeting with ASEAN ambassadors in Beijing, asking the region to take action. Myanmar's borderlands have become a hotbed for online fraud operations. Foreigners are trafficked and forced to work there as scammers, an industry that analysts say is worth billions of dollars. Myanmar's military government is also calling on neighbors to help. According to state media, Myanmar has caught and deported more than 55,000 foreigners involved in border scams since October 2023. Well, the vast majority, 53,000 of them, were from China. That's more than 95% of the total. Deportees also came from Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, and India, among others. And for more now, we are joined by our correspondents Tan Si-Hui in Beijing and Saksit Sasombat in Bangkok. First to you, Saksit, perhaps you can give us a quick recap about what happened the last few weeks and what's been the reaction on the ground in Thailand.
Now, the problem of scam centers in Southeast Asia is not a new one. Viewers probably have been getting one of these calls at least at one point in the past few years, but it has been a flourishing crime business. According to United Nations figures, they have raked in almost $1 billion in recent years. But why has this story flamed up again, especially in particular in the People's Republic of China? Well, because an actor, Wang Xing, has been one of those victims. Earlier this month, he arrived here in Bangkok thinking that he would be part of a casting call. The people behind them, they have lured him, pretending to be a well-known Thai entertainment company, and they have lured him to Thailand. But once he arrived here in Bangkok, instead of getting a casting call here in Bangkok, he was driven to the border in Myanmar and then over the border to a town called Myawaddy, which is a notorious crime hub where lots of these compounds exist, run by crime syndicates, many of them from mainland China, and they are forcing people against their will to conduct these phone scams and online scams. And if they don't, they might also get tortured or otherwise a worse fate might happen to them. But in this specific case about Wang Xing, the actor, he has been quickly rescued and then brought back to Thailand. He is now home, but he is just one of many Chinese citizens that have been caught in this peril. Of course, the story of him and others have gained traction on Chinese social media, with many people actually fearing to come to Thailand. The search results of people canceling their trips to Thailand has gone up as well. But we have talked to people here in Thailand that are already here, Chinese tourists from the mainland specifically, asking them what their experience has been so far. So let's take a listen.
在中国，我觉得新闻上面写的可能有点太过激了。然后我来之前我也有很多担忧，但是我来之后我觉得还是蛮安全的，并不像国内宣传的那么的过激。但是我觉得在国外总归要小心一点，但是没有想象中的、没有宣传的那么的危险。
然后我们说要来泰国旅游的时候，我的朋友其实有点担心。但是我们整体来这边，其实跟我几年前来泰国的感觉是差不多的。但是我们还是会比较注意安全，就是尽量跟朋友待在一起，然后不去比较偏远的地方。
Now, Sui, we have heard from the tourists here in Bangkok, but what has the reaction back home for them in China been like?
Yeah, it's really very horrendous what you just talked about, what Wang Xing went through. And this case, this high-profile case, reignited conversations all across China, including social media. Now, if you look at social media app Xiaohongshu, if you just type Thailand in the search bar, the first thing that comes out is 泰国安全吗, which is Thailand safe? And there were 250,000 notes there, and you can see social media users warning others to be careful when they go to Thailand, to stay in crowded areas, and also to search for other Chinese tourists when they travel over there, or just completely not go to Thailand. And so there is this shroud of uncertainty and fear when it comes to going to Thailand as well as Southeast Asia as a whole. Now, estimates are saying that there has been a surge of flight cancellations, 155% in the weekend, January 11. That was shortly after that high-profile case went viral online. And Hong Kong singer Eason Chan, he canceled a sold-out concert next month in Bangkok, citing safety concerns. Now, I spoke to some residents here in China, and they echoed the same reservations.
会有这方面的顾虑。如果我要出国旅游的话，可能会把泰国排到后面。
暂时不想去，而且日后也不想去，因为不安全的地方我们是没必要去冒险的。
后边对于这种在东南亚那边可能会有一些抗拒，而且好像泰国的警方对此并没有做出特别多的贡献，至少这个我看来好像是这样，所以就会比较抗拒这个。
起码给我们的公民要加大一些普及这方面教育的一个力度吧，就是加强我们这种防范的意识，然后同时也和泰方的政府去做一些沟通和交涉。
现在这诈骗忒多了，无处不在。
So a few days have passed since that incident with Wang Xing, but discussions is still rampant over social media. What we've heard, although not officially confirmed, there was a case in Shanghai where a gym employer, he had organized a team bonding event in Thailand, and he brought 30 over employees over to Thailand for that team bonding event, only to go missing. And so apparently that gym is now shut down. But again, this is not officially confirmed, but we can see that it's still very clear in the minds of Chinese residents that this is a case that is very worrying to them. But this is not something, telecom frauds is not something very new to any of us. In 2023, estimates suggest that financial losses by East Asian and Southeast Asian victims have come up to $37 billion.
Yeah, not hard to see why the Chinese tourists are still, very apprehensive going to Thailand. And Saksi, the thing is that, Thailand actually welcomed, 35 million visitors last year, and 6.7 million of them are actually from mainland China, which clearly indicates that it is an important segment of Thailand's tourism sector. So, Saksi, tell us more about that, and why is it crucial that the authorities take action?
I'm going to give you another number, $50 billion in revenue for last year as well. That is also gives you an idea why it is so important to Thailand and its economy. And as you said, the Chinese tourist segment is the largest and has been the largest in years, with the exception of the pandemic year. So you can see that Thai tourism authorities and the Thai government are somewhat in panic mode over this, as seeing that these numbers might dip. And this is why they're counter-steering against it. That's why they are trying to fight the PR front, on the PR front, to convince Thai people that it is safe. And I remember that in October 2023, we had an incident here in Thailand about a shooting in a mall where 3 people have died. One of them was a Chinese citizen. And then you also had the same echo or similar echo that we have been talking about just earlier then, with people being afraid of coming here to Thailand. But as a side note here, we know that on Chinese social media, things exist on there because the authorities allow to exist. So in that sense, allowing content that is maybe disparaging to another country, that is also something that has to be kept in mind. But of course, the Thai authorities need to build confidence again, even though on the other side, there are already some voices and there are some legislators and lawmakers here from the opposition that have been raising questions about the visa-free scheme for Chinese tourists and other countries as well that has been in place since 2023, allowing a lot of citizens, a lot of tourists from many countries to come here in Thailand with a visa on arrival, with a rather generous visa on arrival for a month plus. So the question that these lawmakers are raising here is, by giving these generous visa schemes here, who are we actually letting in and what are they doing in Thailand? Now, even though Thailand itself is not necessarily the crime scene here, as we said, these scam centers are in neighboring Myanmar and Cambodia, but Thailand is being used as a transition country, as a transitional country, and as a staging ground by crime syndicates here. So this is the pain point and the pressure point for the Thai authorities to act against it. And speaking of acting against it, Sui, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has called on ASEAN nations to crack down on these frauds. So what has come out of it?
Yeah, that's right. So last week, Wang Yi said that China will collaborate with ASEAN countries. China has since vowed to crack down on these cross-border criminal gangs. They say that they will rescue those trapped overseas and they will dismantle these telecom fraud dens.
中国政府坚决打击电信网络诈骗犯罪，坚决打击跨境违法犯罪活动，坚决保护中国公民的合法权益。我们也一贯要求海外中国公民严格遵守当地的法律法规，不从事违法犯罪活动。
And Chinese, Thai, Myanmar officials, they reached a consensus that they want to eradicate these telecom fraud centers in Myanmar. And they reached that consensus on Tuesday in the Chinese city of Kunming, and other Southeast Asian countries like Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar, and Vietnam. They've also vowed that they will make every effort to rescue those overseas. You mentioned that visa-free travel earlier on, Saksif, and the spring travel is coming soon. So even though I think a lot of Chinese residents have some uncertainty and some fear, but even so, I'm sure there are going to be a lot of Chinese residents going to Thailand during that Spring Festival break. So what exactly is the Thai government going to do to ensure that the Chinese residents feel safe there?
Now, we have heard from security and government officials and ministers that there is going to be a widespread crime crackdown, not only on scam centers, but also other illicit crimes and businesses as well. They have given themselves a generous time window of 6 months to see results there. But then also, as I mentioned before, that there is also efforts on the PR front to convince Chinese tourists and any other tourists that Thailand itself, and a novel way, an unorthodox way, that's something that Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra has chosen. She has published a pre-recorded video, but, however, she has also used artificial intelligence to speak Mandarin and to directly address tourists from mainland China. So let's have a listen.
因此，我已要求有关当局加强合作，共同提升安全标准，并以最有效的方式打击跨国犯罪。我们将严格执法，打击非法出入境，并为旅泰中国游客提供系统性全方位协助支持，防范意外事件发生。泰国政府高度重视游客的安全，我们将努力与中国朋友加强沟通，并为所有游客建立信心。
Now, we have to stress again, this is an AI-generated video handed to us by Thai government house. This is not Prime Minister Paetongtarn suddenly able to speak Mandarin here, but it goes to show here that how important it is that they are trying to reach out here. But there's an irony here because these crime syndicates, these scam syndicates, they're using AI fakes as well to scam people. Prime Minister Paetongtarn herself has said that she has been targeted in one of those not too long ago. So apparently the best, and yet still the Thai government thinks the best way to convince people that things are safe is by using an AI-generated video here. But it also goes to show here that it's not only about Chinese tourists, it's about everybody here, and especially the problem of scam centers that affects everybody. It affects the Chinese tourists, but it affects a lot of other people as well. Many other people have been scammed, and also many other people
being dragged into this problem here. And so this is why it became a wider problem. And so this is why many countries are recognizing that it needs a wider regional response to combat these crime rings.
Oh, the AI video we saw earlier was incredibly realistic, I have to say. It's so good having you both on East Asia tonight. Thank you so much. CNA's Tan Hui in Beijing and Saksit Sasombat in Bangkok. Earlier, I spoke with Trip.com's group's CEO, Jane Sun, about the concerns of Chinese travelers when it comes to visiting Thailand. And as she tells us, safety is paramount.
Thai is always very good with their hospitality, their service level, the comprehensive product offerings. That's why inbound travel accounts for a significant of their GDP. So I hope the government will put really strong method to attract and protect all the inbound customers.
I think there is some talk that maybe the Thai government might want to actually shorten the number of days for visa-free Chinese tourists. Do you think that's going to make any impact?
The travel industry is very competitive. Consumers have very wide selection. So just because visa or just because of certain features is not enough. It needs to be a comprehensive offering. Like I said, the safety is number one concern. Visa application is number two. Direct flight is number three. Hospitality on the local level is number four. There are so many things we need to consider as a whole before the consumer decide where to go. So only one element is not going to make our consumers to shift, but many items add together, consumers will make a wise choice and compare different destinations and select the one that fits their need the best. If customers still want to go to warm area, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand are always top three. Now, if you have some concern in Thailand, there are sufficient alternatives. For example, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, these are still quite warm. Last Chinese New Year from Long Ho, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa become the top three travel destinations for long haul customers.
And, our correspondent has reported that, there is a surge in cancellations to Thailand. So I'm curious to know, you think this is just a knee-jerk reaction that it's going to resume? When do you foresee travel to Thailand returning to normal levels?
Yeah, it's very normal when some natural disaster happens or accident happens. We'll see a dramatic cancellation. What Trip.com team does is within 2 minutes when this accident happened, we'll reach out to our customers, making sure they are very well taken care of. There are many things government can do with the companies together. For example, we will make sure our consumers will travel with trusted local service provider. We will stay in the safe area, making sure customers is very well protected. If, for example, at the Las Vegas shooting, we saw a significant cancellation in our booking, but now everything is back to normal. So I think travel is something needs a lot of concerted efforts by all parties, government, industry players, local tour operators, hotels, airlines. We all need to work together to provide a very safe and healthy environment so consumers can enjoy themselves for their vacation.
Time now for another break, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, South Korea looking at a possible turning point in its demographic crisis as its birth rate is set to rise for the first time in 9 years. South Korea's birth rate could show a rise in 2024 for the first time in 9 years. Incomplete data from last year shows that the number of births between January and November rose 3% compared to a year ago. In comparison, the number of newborns in 2023 fell for the 8th consecutive year. Without the most recent data, South Korea has the world's lowest fertility rate at 0.72 annually. Well, South Korea has long been grappling with what it calls a national demographic crisis, where the aging population starts to outnumber the younger populace. Seoul rolled out measures last year to encourage young people to get married and have children. The recent hike in births follows a rebound in marriages, which were delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Shanghai, once teeming with expatriates, is now struggling to attract foreigners to live and work in a Chinese city. Experts say an increasingly educated local population, pandemic, and lower salaries are some of the reasons for the exodus. In this week's episode of the CNA Correspondent Podcast, Teresa Tang speaks to Tan Yu-Guan about what inspired the story and whether the shrinking expat scene is here to stay.
What made you sort of stop and say, hey, there aren't as many foreigners as there used to be?
That's really one of the first things that friends, expats, and locals alike, right, or even car-hailing drivers will tell you. That's one of the first things. Oh, there used to be a lot more foreigners. It's like what you would say, they're koto-chan, something that they keep saying. Especially to newbies. Once they know you are a newbie, right, they'll say, oh, the city used to be so vibrant, so much more vibrant, rather. It's still very vibrant, but they'll say, oh, it's so much more, right? Or they'll say, oh, this restaurant used to be packed and needs to be reserved way ahead of time, but now you can just walk in and get a table. And that made me quite curious, right? Like, what's going on? Like, really? Has there really been a drop in the number of expats? And, has there really been a big impact? Because when I landed, to me, it's a vibrant city. It's a big city. It's a great city, right? I don't see anything particularly wrong with it.
And you can catch the rest of that interesting episode and other behind-the-scenes conversations with our global team of reporters on our podcast, CNA Correspondent. It's also available on our website, CNA or Me Listen apps, as well as on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And ahead on Asia tonight, here are just some of the stories that we'll also be covering. China and the European Union are willing to talk but vow to firmly defend their own interests as Donald Trump talks new tariffs in the coming days. Mr. Trump warning that he may impose a 10% tariff on Chinese imports as early as next week. Just a day into the job, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio hosts his first meeting with the foreign ministers of the Quad nations, doubling down on their commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. And Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim tells the World Economic Forum in Davos ASEAN is prioritizing free trade and digital transformation within the bloc. These stories and more on Asia tonight, 8 p.m. Singapore-Hong Kong time, right here on CNA. And that's everything we've got for you in East Asia tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. Thanks for watching.